Good evening, everyone. My name is Phoenix, for those that may not know. Before we get started this evening, I would like to give a very special thank you to each and every one of you. Back to Ashes has now reached over 1,000 subscribers. This would not be possible without you and your support, and for that, I am eternally grateful. I will also start doing birthday shoutouts as my appreciation to each and every one of you. If you have an upcoming birthday in the month that these recordings come out, please leave it in the comment below and you will receive your special shoutout at the beginning of the videos. And for anyone whose birthday has already passed in January 2023, please let me know and I will include it in the next video. With that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we return to the ashes, we will arise a better, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Tonight I will be reading True Paranormal Encounters. Let's get started, shall we? I'm naturally a scientifically minded and rational person who comes from a place of skepticism. Basically, I'm trying to get some perspective on what happened and explore all avenues because I'm left dumbfounded. Me and my 2 children were visiting my parents for dinner, and they live in the middle of the woods. It's my family home where I grew up. About halfway through the evening, the kids were watching TV inside, and my parents were busy talking in the other room. So I went out to my dad's detached shop to practice pool for a little while. I let them know where I was going before I did this. I'm an avid pool player, and he has a table, so I figured I would run some drills for around 30 minutes. After I finished up, I walked out the door to go back into the house, and it was almost dark. Still some light, but not much. I was halfway to the house when I heard a child's voice in the woods. I couldn't understand what it said, but it was clear as day and sounded like it was maybe 100 yards away. I stopped and looked in the direction it came from, trying to see if maybe it was one of my own kids, and they had went outside without me knowing. Then I heard the voice again, and it literally said my name like it was calling to me. However, it didn't really sound like one of my kids, so I yelled back and got no answer. I walked towards the woods a little, expecting to see who it was, but I never saw anything. I stood there for a while calling before I immediately went inside to check on my kids, to make sure one of them hadn't wandered off into the woods. And when I got inside, they were still sitting in the same spot watching TV. I asked my mom if they were outside, and she said they never went outside. Now, for some perspective, my parents live in the middle of nowhere. There's no houses within a mile of them, and no one else around them has kids who would know me by name. I'm genuinely creeped out by this. Has anyone else experienced anything similar? Hello. First of all, English is not my mother language, so I apologize beforehand. This happened to me many, many years ago, and I think the story can be a bit hard to understand, so I will try my best. One night, I went to an event from my dad's with a friend. He was gay and had a boyfriend, but agreed to be my chaperone. And when the night was ending at about midnight, and we said our goodbyes, he told me, "Oh, my boyfriend asked me to tell you to message him when you reach home." Mind you, we didn't have any smartphones or mobile internet at the time. So when I reached home, I connected and sent my friend's boyfriend a message. Let's call him Cal. So I messaged Cal and said, "Hey, Mike told me you wanted to speak to me. I had only ever talked with Cal on the internet. We haven't met in person yet. Oh yeah, I dreamt about you, he told me, and then proceeded to narrate his dream to me. I will try my best to tell you what Cal's dream was about, but I have probably forgotten some details. It was a day in the afternoon. I was at the insert a known place in my city when I met a child. This child was apparently lost. He was wearing old clothes and took my finger and started walking with me. I followed him and arrived at a house where there was a red sweater hanging like it had been left out to dry in the sun. What was weird was that at the time I was at my rebellious phase and wore only black. I didn't own any other color clothes, but since I had this event I mentioned at the beginning, I was wearing at the same moment a red sweater. I went inside the house. The kid started to show me around. We arrived at a room that was kind of weird. It was like it was made of mirrors. My parents' room had 2 huge wardrobes and the doors were made of mirrors. Again, I didn't know Cal in person, and he had never been in my house. But for some reason, I started to get really nervous by that moment. Like everything felt heavier by the minute. Then we went into another room. That was also weird because the windows are really close to the floor, like huge windows. He mentioned that he saw in the dream that the windows were close to the floor because they were actually very close to the bed. Again, it wasn't exactly the case, but my bed was really tall and was really close to the window in height, like 8 inches difference. And what he was saying to me described the house I lived at. That moment, again, my parents' house. Honestly, I was terrified at this point. The kid told me this was his house, that he lived here. He told me he loves your family, but he loves you especially because you play with him every night. At this point, he had told me the name of the child. To this day, I don't say the name out loud because when I used to do it, he appeared and the room would feel heavy. What is important is that the name he told me was the name of an online character I had at the time. A character I would play with every night. This is important because my friend Mike didn't know about this. He knew about everything else. He saw me use the red sweater that day, and he had been to my parents' house, but he didn't know about the online game. He just wasn't into that. So, the kid loves you and told me that he sits at the window and watches you sleep. I picked up the phone at that moment and called Mike to scream at him. I had been chatting with Cal for about an hour or so, but I didn't care and started asking Mike if he had told Cal anything about how my parents' house looked like, or what I was wearing that day. But he simply said, "Why would I do that?" And since we were young, it makes sense. You tell people if a friend has a pool or really cool stuff, but you don't describe so much details about your parents' bedroom. I guess I just believed Mike and was terrified. He called Cal though and asked him to stop scaring me, but I was not able to get any sleep until it was sunny again. Oh, another important detail was that Cal swears to me that the child left a mark on his finger. Remember I said the child took his finger to drag him into the house? Well, when we finally met in person, not long after, he showed me the mark. It was small and round and dark, but not black, like a birthmark. I asked Mike to tell me he had the mark before when they met, but Mike assured me that the mark was new, and Cal insisted it appeared on his finger after the dream. Also, I'm still friends with Mike and Cal. It wasn't a birthmark. The mark went away from Cal's finger. I don't know when because we didn't meet for several years, but when we met again a couple years ago, he didn't have it anymore. Cal remembers the dream to this day, too. To this day, I don't say that name. It's like I summoned the spirit, or ghost, or whatever it was. Weird stuff happened at that house, and I believe a lot was related to his spirit. But I will post more encounters with it some other day, since it's pretty late. I wanted to share this because the other day I posted something that didn't belong here. I hope this does, and I hope I never see that child again. About 5 years ago, when I was 17, I visited some of my family who lived in South Dakota and worked there for the summer. After about a month, my brother, sister, and her husband decided to do what Americans do best and go shoot guns in the woods. I had to work an evening shift, so it was decided we go after, around 10 p.m. Once my shift ended, we went to their house to pack up the truck with some snacks, guns, and ammo. The driver took around 45 minutes, and it took us up a dirt road surrounded by trees and tall grass. Eventually, it opened up into a clearing that was pretty open and flat. The nearest tree line was about 100 feet away. It was pretty dark, but the clearing was lit up by the truck's headlights. I kind of felt uneasy, but I chalked that up to just being in the woods at night. For the first 20 minutes, nothing really happened. We were just setting up plastic bottles and those plastic gallon buckets you'd get water out of at an office. There was a feeling of being watched that we all felt. The area suddenly reeked of spoiled eggs. Those of you who have shot guns know they can smell bad. Ever since going to the military, no amount of guns or explosions have smelled this bad. We looked around to see if we could see the source, and what I saw, I can still vividly remember to this day. What I saw was a thin, humanoid figure crouching down looking at us. Even while crouching down, it was still about 6 feet in height. When I say this figure was thin, I mean skin and bones barely do it justice. The even weirder thing about this was we all saw the figure in different spots in the tree line, but we all described the same features: tall, thin, and had long dark hair. We quickly packed up what we could and left. The feeling of dread felt that day will forever haunt me. Since then, my brother mentioned the area might have been in native territory, but I don't know how if that's true. Every once in a while, I think back on that day, and I look up different stories and encounters people have in the woods, but nothing quite resembles what I saw that day. My apartment has been a hotbed of paranormal activity. It mostly centers around my friend. He saw a shadow figure poke in my bedroom doorway. A few nights later, he saw a black orb slam my kitchen cabinet. The next night, I said I don't want to see that and closed and latched the bedroom door. A few seconds after I lay down, the bedroom door unlatched and flew open. From then on, I would hear knocks around the apartment that started as soon as I went to bed. A few days later, a pen cap was thrown and landed on a tiny piece of paper I didn't recognize. My friend swears he didn't throw it, and his aim would have to be incredibly perfect to land on the paper, which was smaller than the paper in a fortune cookie. I read online that you should imagine a white light coming out of you to cleanse an area. My friend was half asleep. I did this and he screamed. I did it 3 more times and he immediately screamed each time. He screamed like someone having night terrors and quickly went back to sleep each time. There was a night when I could hear the bedroom door creaking back and forth. From living in this apartment for 7 years, I know that it never does that. There was a loud static in the air. All the dogs in the apartment complex were barking. I texted my friend, who picks up bodies for a living, how he could not believe in ghosts. He told me he had just picked up a body at the nursing home up the road from my apartment. I think there is a portal probably in my bedroom and something was coming out of it. A few weeks ago, I brought my friend back, who had not been at my apartment in a while. As soon as he came in, we were both hearing things. It sounded demonic. He said he saw a girl in a dress and other things as well. I just got back to my apartment after a few nights away. I took a shower and I have scratches all over me, with most of them being in groups of 3. I have pictures, but I'm not allowed to post them. I hope that whatever is haunting me leaves, or I will have no other choice but to move. This happened to me in a group of friends a couple years ago when I was about 19. I've done tons of research and turned up nothing similar. One night, me and 2 friends that I haven't seen in a while recently got back in contact. I was bored, so I hit them up. Hey guys, I know it's been forever, but would y'all be down to hang out and maybe go out for a late night hike? They were down and said they'd be right over. Me, excited to go for a night walk in the woods, smoke some weed. Before you say, oh, you were just high, it's important to the story. And they picked me up to head out. We go get some food on the way, and while there, I offered if they wanted to smoke, which they declined because they don't smoke. So, me stoned, them sober as a bug, we got on the back roads to go to a patch of woods with paths, and while we're driving, I see it. On the side of the road, laying on its side like someone huddled over in the cold, it had a bright red face, almost like crazy bad road rash or something. It had a sheen to it. It was also dressed in dark, raggedy robes, like the ones you see on fantasy monsters or witches. I know that's a lame description. That's just all I can think of. It scared the living shit out of me. But I was so excited to go to the woods, I thought to myself, okay, that was scary AF, but you were probably just a little too baked and saw an old trash can. You were fine. Do not say anything to the girls, because they'll definitely get a bad feeling and our night hike will end there. So, I didn't. I was silent about it and never mentioned it. Then, we got to the parking lot of the woods. I'm looking at my phone, and one of my friends in a scared tone says, "What the F is that?" I was overcome with fear instantly, like I had an instinct or something, and without looking up, I muttered out, "What is it?" This shit chills my bones to this day. She said, "I don't effing know. It's freaky. It's like a homeless man with a bloodied face watching us from the pavilion." I'm literally crapping myself at this point, and the other friend says, "He's just watching us. It looks like his clothes are made of rags." I said, "Let's get the hell out of there," and then told them I saw exactly the same thing on the road earlier, but thought I was just going crazy. I was so frazzled about the whole thing, I tried every way to rationalize it. We thought maybe it's a black trash can with a red dome lid and the bag was over the edge. So I went back the next day, and there was absolutely nothing under the pavilion. No barbecue, no trash can, just a table. It took me a year to go back, and I still won't go after dark. About 15 years ago, I lived in a house with my girlfriend. Over the course of about 5 years, we had numerous strange things happen. In our basement, there were 2 steel poles used to support the ground floor of the house. The first incident happened around 10 p.m. We were in bed watching TV when we heard what sounded like a hammer hitting those poles. She was scared and thought someone was in the house. I had to go down to the basement alone to check, but found nothing, and the basement door was locked. Second event. We were in the living room watching TV when we heard a very loud bang from inside the closet next to the front door. I checked and again found nothing out of place and no evidence of anything. The third and final thing was again in the living room. We had just become parents a few months earlier and had a few different rocker-type beds for the baby. The one in the living room was a small one that the baby kind of laid upright in and had a base that you could rock up and down. While we were sitting in the living room, the thing started rocking on its own. This went on for about 30 seconds. We both saw it at the same time, but said nothing. When I started to say something to her, it just stopped. After that, we decided it was time to move. We moved into town from out in the country to a small 2-bedroom house. After a week or so after we settled down, we started to notice a few things. Nothing major at first, but just weird. The smaller bedroom next to the bathroom seemed a little off to us as well. Our 2 cats would never go in there, but would sit at the threshold staring in. This is the house where I was physically touched by something I couldn't see, but I could definitely feel. We had a very small bathroom. When you entered the door, the sink was on your right and the tub was on your left, and just past that was the toilet. The walkway was just big enough for one person to walk through. I was standing against the sink, facing the mirror brushing my teeth, when I was pushed against the sink. At first, I thought it was my young daughter pushing me, but when I looked, I realized the door was shut and I was alone. I told my girlfriend about it, and she said this house didn't feel like the last house, energy-wise, but I disagreed. The one other major thing happened when I was home alone because my girlfriend and daughter were out of town. I was sitting in the living room at the computer desk playing games, with my headphones on. It was late, probably after midnight. While I was playing, I felt 2 hands rest on my shoulders and felt a weight push down on me. That one freaked me out a lot more because I was alone, and this wasn't just a bump. It was a real physical contact. I left that night and crashed at my cousin's house. We lived there about 1 more year, but nothing made contact with me physically again. But I always felt like something was there. I have never shared any of this with anyone except my brother and girlfriend. The house I bought about 6 years ago now has had nothing happen here, which is a relief. We both even mentioned when we moved in that it felt clean of bad energy and vibes. I may never know what that was that made contact with me. Or, if we had stayed longer, what would have gotten worse. All I do know is that I felt like something not of this world of existence was messing with me. So off and on for the past several years, I've been dealing with what I believe is some sort of activity. and I've been wondering if there's an entity going back and forth between me and my grandparents' house. For context, they built their house and no one had passed away in it, but everyone who's been there has experienced something. We hear footsteps once in a while. Something grabbed my wrist once when I was 5 and when I was 10. I woke up to what I thought was my grandmother calling my name over and over, but she was asleep when I went into her room. The lights in their kitchen went absolutely haywire after my great-grandmother's funeral. Their living room ceiling fan came down suddenly, which I know can just happen. And recently, their TV stand just shattered, which I know can just happen sometime with tempered glass. And no, it's not near a window or heating system, and I don't think there were any cracks in it. As for my own home, I've moved between different apartments throughout my life. I had an experience when I was 11, when I woke up during the night and saw a reflection of a girl in my TV that was at the foot of my bed who waved at me. And most places I've lived. I'll occasionally hear more footsteps. My siblings' toys would play on their own, and sometimes I hear tapping on my walls. In my current home, there's been a loud bang in my bathroom wall right next to me just past midnight. I woke up to the sound of something whistling in my kitchen, which is just outside my bedroom, though I'm not completely sure if I was awake or dreaming this. And recently, I've woken up to my kitchen lights being turned on, which they're set on a dial rather than a switch. My cats also have a tendency to stare up at the ceiling as if they're watching or chasing something. I'm not sure if these events are connected or not, but I've always felt like I've been followed by something my entire life. But I never knew if it was good or bad. But I've taken the events in my grandparents' house during my childhood as aggressive. But I haven't been touched or attacked by anything since. I'm wondering if this could be the same entity or two different ones. I haven't messed with any Ouija boards or anything sketchy like that. And I know not to be afraid of whatever this thing is, but I'm convinced there's something going on. I've tried sage once in the past at a previous home, but not in this one. Does anyone have any advice or recommendations? It would greatly be appreciated. Honestly, if I knew for a fact that whatever this was isn't a bad entity, I wouldn't be so concerned. But it's the not knowing that bothers me the most. I know not to be afraid, but I'd still like to figure out what's going on. One time, I was sitting with a friend on a bench, and that's when we saw it. At first, we thought it was a spider web, but it didn't have anything to hold on to. My friend and I got up and approached this object. She took it between her hands. It was a transparent thread that had limits. It measured around 1 or 2 meters. She picked it up and positioned it upright. At first, it was in a horizontal position. Then, she passed it to me. When I held it in my hands, I could see that it was a semi-transparent thread. It looked ghostly and a little bit luminous. The object then flew out to sea extremely fast. We sat down on the bench again and talked about what happened. A while later, we saw that the object was rapidly approaching us again. This time, it was positioned very close to our eyes, and that's when we got scared. It was literally in front of our faces, less than half a meter. Then, we never saw it again. Some very important points. When my friend passed it to me and I took it, I couldn't feel it, but I was carrying it between my fingers. It changed shape. Sometimes it looked like a straight thread, and at other times it was wavy. When it moved away towards the beach, it did it in a very abrupt way, as if it was alive and wanted to move away. We rule out that it was a light effect because light cannot be caught. We ruled out that it was a spider web because it had limits. It was not hooked anywhere. And let's face it, spider webs don't go into the sea and then mysteriously return to the same place. Has anyone else seen something similar? We cannot explain what we witnessed. My old house is haunted, and weird shit happens around it. For context, my family moved into my old house in Australia around the time I turned 5 years old. We lived there for 13 years and moved out a few months ago. Since before even moving into that house, I could see and hear weird stuff that would range from anything going quiet and hearing a disembodied male voice calling my name from over the fence in our backyard at the time, to running to my parents' room after having a nightmare to see tendril-like shadows thrashing around on the wall above my younger brother's cot. They gave me an overwhelming feeling of fear and sickness before passing out and waking up to my parents freaking out over finding me passed out on the floor outside their room the next morning. Most of that stuff is easily explained by me being a dumbass kid who had sneakily watched too many freaky shows my dad would watch at the time, without him knowing, and developing an overactive imagination and irrational fears. However, a little while after moving into the house that this is all about, I would begin to have reoccurring night terrors every week. In said dreams, I would wake up laying on my stomach in front of the cupboard door in my room, with the door slightly open, just enough that I could see the glow from the static you'd get on those old box TVs, which we had our PlayStation 2 hooked up to in the cupboard sitting on a sort of table. In the dreams, I couldn't move at all. Not like how in sleep paralysis where you feel paralyzed. More like I felt an immense weight on my back that I couldn't push off. Not that I really tried because I was too scared to move, but I could feel something holding me there. I would begin to hear this female voice repeating something which I cannot remember. The voice slowly got deeper and deeper, more and more angry, until eventually I just woke up, laying in the same spot in real life. Cupboard door still cracked open. No glow from the TV though. Obviously, I'd sprint down the hallway to my parents' room, where I'd practically leap into their bed, feeling like something was chasing me. My parents chalked it up to me being a kid and having the overactive imagination they know I had. They are also very ignorant when it comes to malevolent spirits or anything paranormal to this day, despite believing in Christianity. These dreams happened every week for 5 weeks until they stopped. And after a while, not sure how long I'd begun to forget about the dreams, until one night I once again woke up on the floor in front of the cupboard, door cracked open, with a faint glow of the staticky TV. Only, this time there was no voice, just pure silence. All of a sudden, the weight on my back turned into a pull on my legs, which dragged me at effing Mach 10 down the hallway, through the garage door and up through a manhole into the attic, and across the floor of the attic to a box where I could make out a small piece of paper sitting on it with something written on said paper. And then I woke up in my bed, scared but not feeling like anything else was there with me, so I went back to sleep after laying there, shedding bricks for a while. Fast forward like 10 years, and I asked my parents if they remember me having these dreams. Turns out, I never mentioned the last one to them, because apparently my dad had gone up into the attic about a year ago to check for rats because we kept hearing scratching on the ceiling, and he found a single effing envelope with a woman's name on it, which he can't remember. I asked what he did with it, and he said he threw it out because it didn't seem important, and he felt wrong about opening an envelope addressed to someone else. Fast forward another year and a half, about a year before we moved out. One night, really late, like 2 to 3 a.m., I'm chilling in my room. Different one from the one where I had the dreams. Slightly further down the hall, closer to my parents' room, and more importantly, the bathroom. Watching videos on my phone. By this point, both my brother and I had really effed sleep schedules. So he was taking a shower and brushing his teeth in the bathroom before he went to bed, when I hear a loud as F bang. Wondering what the F he's doing, I go to open the door and he steps out and nearly shits himself when he sees me. I can tell he is scared and freaking out, so I ask him what the F is going on and what that bang was. He tells me he saw a face coming out of the wall behind him in the mirror, and being my brother, he punches the mirror, which makes it disappear. I was skeptical, thinking my brother might be tripping on something or had just imagined it due to being sleep deprived. So I went and checked the bathroom, which he refused to go back into, and found nothing. A few years later, my ex and I are chilling on the couch in the living room late at night again when we hear a bang. So again, I go check and see my brother standing in the bathroom staring at the mirror, unblinking and hand shaking. I ask him what the F is happening. He walks out and answers, "I saw it effing again." What? The effing face on the wall. We all say F that and leave. Hear what sounds what I assume was plastic coat hangers moving around in the bathroom. Then, after building up the balls to go back in to see what we could find, we found a drawing on the window in the condensation. When I tried to wipe it off with my hand, I realized it was drawn on the side of the window that is in between the fly screen and side we were on. There was no way anyone could have drawn that without taking the fly screen off. After all this and years of other smaller things, I decided I wanted to know what the F was going on and stayed up all night with my ex and brother researching the house. We ended up finding out a young woman went missing in the area a while back. I also checked rental lease records on the house and found that someone had moved in and out of the house within 2 months, during which the woman had also gone missing. So, my theory is that some sicko kidnapped and murdered this poor woman, and she was trying to reach out to us. Something tells me that the voice I heard in my dreams was hers. If anyone could tell me their opinion on what was happening, that would be great, as I feel like my theory is based off a lot more conjecture than actual evidence. A lot of other weird stuff has happened in and around that house. Here are 2 more examples. A friend of my brother's took a video of a weird cube flying above a clearing in the bush next to the house, which came closer to him before flying off. I heard something screech and what sounded like an entire effing tree being snapped in half in the bush next to a playground at midnight after leaving it, because I felt like I was being watched. I proceeded to skate home as fast as I could. Other than that, strange things continue to happen. Hopefully, everything ends soon. This happened a few years ago and has stuck with me since then. purely because of how terrifying it was. So me and my brother have the same room. We have a double roof bed, and I sleep in the upper part. The bed isn't really comfortable, and whenever I slept on it, my back would hurt a lot in the morning. Point is, I would occasionally go to sleep with my mom since her bed was really comfy and cozy. One night, when I decided to sleep at my mom's, I woke up for no apparent reason. I checked the timer that was on my right, and it was around 3 to 4 a.m. This wasn't really a big surprise because this would happen a few times a month, but this one felt different. After readjusting myself in the bed, while looking at the open door on my left that would lead to the hallway, a black silhouette of a head just appeared, peeking at me. My eyes opened wide immediately, but I closed them shortly after, but still had them a little open so I could see the figure. At this point, my heart started racing more than it ever done in my life. It would not go away. It would just stand there staring at me, not moving an inch, as if it was making sure I wouldn't try to get up and do something. The staring went on for probably 30 to 45 minutes. I don't truly know how long, and I did not dare move to my right to check what time it was. After those extremely long 30 to 45 minutes, the figure proceeded to go somewhere else, I guess. Of course, I was still extremely scared, so I couldn't just sleep after that. After some time had passed, I noticed that the door started closing. We didn't have the balcony open, so it couldn't have been the air doing that. At the same time, I never noticed any arm pulling the door or anything like that. Maybe it was just too dark or my eyes were too closed to see it, but whatever. I didn't sleep the whole night. I just kept looking at the door and anticipating what was going to happen next, but nothing else happened after that. I noticed it was getting brighter outside, so I kept thinking of getting up and checking the house. Once it became pretty bright outside, I turned to my right to look at what time it was, and it was about 6 a.m. I finally had gotten the courage to get up and cautiously opened the door leading to the hallway to check if anything was wrong. I checked every single room, but I didn't find anything wrong. All the balcony doors were locked. The door leading outside to the rest of the flat was also completely locked. To say the least, I was very relieved and also very confused. At this point, my mind had already raced through a million different thoughts about what this figure could have been. It could have been a burglar, but I didn't notice any door unlocked or tampered with. I told the story to my brother, and he told me that maybe it was him because he would occasionally check up on us at night to make sure that we were okay. If it was, though, I would have been able to discern his facial features, right? The thing I saw was a pitch black silhouette. No hair, no nothing. At least I should have been able to recognize his long hair. I honestly have no idea what it could have been, other than a weird spirit just deciding to pay us a visit. I really don't know. In December of 2021, my girlfriend and our son moved into an apartment in Aberdeen, Washington. In no way is she a non-believer of the paranormal, but she does get spooked at the idea of sharing a roof with a spirit. In the year of living at this apartment, she hadn't heard any knocking, movement, and or seen any shadow figures. Sometime after, I started visiting her. We quickly found signs that we weren't alone. She would hear knocks or what sounded like something wandering around in her home. Around the third or fourth time of me coming over, We hopped into the shower after a long day of adventuring. After rinsing off and stepping out to dry off, I look up into our son's room, and peering out at me was a tall shadow figure with long arms and glowing red eyes. Within a blink of an eye, it disappeared. Panicked, I leaned into the shower and told my girlfriend what happened. Shocked and stunned, she responded, "Shut up. No way. You're joking, right?" After drying off and getting dressed, I inspected our son's room but couldn't find any sign of the apparition. After both of us calmed down and went to bed, we woke up the next morning talking about what we had encountered. Fast forward to a couple more weeks later, we started moving our son to his own bed and plugged in our baby monitor, then climbed into our bed, cuddled up in pure darkness. As we were slowly drifting off to sleep, we could hear our son start to cry. We were laying there letting him cry out a bit. Then, suddenly, hitting us like a truck, a deep demonic-like voice came through the monitor. "Wake up." Chills went up our spines, and we raced into his room and scooped him up and ran back to our bed. We finally moved her out of the apartment and closer to town. My first adventure with my girlfriend in a ghost town. As a sweet surprise, my girlfriend took me out to the Franklin ghost town. It was an old coal mining town back in the 1800s. In 1894, 37 coal miners suffocated due to a fire that was intentionally started. It's around a 2.5-mile hike, but the path splits into two. At the split, there's an old black minecart. The first path we took was straight, past the cart and into the residential area where old foundations are riddled with vine everywhere, along with beautiful scenery. We continued further down the path and thought we were walking into private property. So we quickly turned around, walking back to the split path. It felt different, almost as if we were being watched from the old foundations. When we made it back to the other path, we heard some of the conversions from the other hikers that were passing by talking about the cemetery. Continuing on the path, we made it to a big hole covered in old rail tracks and welded rebar, which is the same tunnel that the miners suffocated in. I desperately wanted to visit the cemetery, so my girlfriend and I continued down the narrow path. One look on our left side, and we could slide down the steep slope. We got about halfway there to our destination when my girlfriend pointed out this massive minecart track that goes through the woods. Side note, nature reclaiming man-made buildings is something I enjoy taking pictures of and witnessing. After a little while of hiking, we finally made it to the cemetery. It was beautiful. Some headstones had fallen over on their own due to time and elements. Others had ivy and moss grown over, and every headstone had a gift left out for them. Old coins and toys for the little ones. I remember reading a headstone of a little one who passed when they just turned 1. This hike was gorgeous, and the sights and smells were capturing and will forever be engraved in my head. It definitely gave me spooky vibes, but I might have to return with a spirit box. So, I live in rural Midwest United States. I'm in the middle of nowhere, in thick woods. It's a 20-minute drive to the nearest town, and my family owns about a good couple miles of woods around my house. The property my house is on was originally hunting land. My dad bought and cut trees down in and built our house on. Back in like the early 2000s, late 90s, exposition added the wait time for the creepy stories. The earliest one I can remember is faint because I was young, probably at least 8 or 9 years old, but I was outside at night, just hanging around our back door, which had a bright light above it and that illuminated a good 30 feet. I'm playing, doing 9-year-old things, and I heard what sounded like someone go, "Psst," in my ear and touch my back, and I immediately sprinted inside. Stuff like this happens all the time here. Now, time for the unbelievable story. So, I'm home alone a lot because my stepfather works out of state during the summer, and my mom is a freelance photographer and also goes to work with him because she can't be away from him for more than 3 seconds. This happened when I was around 12 years old, and I was home alone for about 2 weeks. Other than the normal paranoia, the creepypasta addicted me would have not much happened until around Wednesday, the second week. It was like 12 a.m. and I was in the kitchen with 2 large windows, which faced a corner of my house, a pool, a large pond, and a tree line. I would show a photo, but I don't know how. But anyway, I was standing in the kitchen. In front of this window was where our microwave was at the time. I was making something to eat when I looked up and saw something what looked to be like someone running on all fours around the pool and then dip behind the corner of my house, then circle around the pond and stand up on 2 legs and just stand in the tree line before sprinting into the woods. Safe to say, I hunkered down in my room without sleeping that night and spent the rest of the week at a family member's house. Now, if you want to hear about how effing effed those woods are, please get a hold of me, because it's an even longer story. By the time my parents got back home and I told them what had happened, they thought I was just seeing things. If anyone else can explain this, please let me know. And also let me know if anything like this has ever happened to you. (2005) I graduated from UT Arlington. A friend of mine from high school and I both decided to move to Austin. We decided to share a moving truck and go together. Before we left, he was finishing up some courses in the summer, and I was working. He was a close friend, and I would often come home late at night and find him sleeping in his car in my driveway, or sleeping on the sofa because my mom had let him in. I honestly didn't ask him any questions about it. He was over all the time anyway. I thought maybe his lease had ended at school and he was trying to avoid paying rent before the move. One day, we were cruising around together and he said, "I gotta go by the house and do some chores." I said, what house?" He told me he had been house sitting in Fort Worth for a couple of his friends. Again, I didn't ask any questions. I just went along for the ride. The house was in an extremely wealthy part of the Hulen area. The whole house was decked out in crazy 1960s and 70s Art Deco stuff. Avocado green shag carpet, bright paisley couches, spinning mobiles hanging from the ceilings, lava lamps, and night lights with hypnotic and psychedelic spirals plugged into almost every outlet. The living room was sunken from the rest of the house, and even with all the extra lights, it seemed dark. I asked him about it, and he immediately got defensive, barking, "This is as bright as it gets." It was late afternoon, and the sun hadn't set. I was still standing in the entryway. I could see off to my right into the dining room, which had a bay window facing the front yard. Clear as anything I've seen in my life, a black cat walked into the dining room, hopped up on one of the dining room chairs, and looked at me. "You're feeding their cat for them?" I asked. I couldn't believe this because my friend was always at my house. "There's no animals here," he said from the kitchen. But," I started. "There's no animals here," he yelled, cutting me off. What the F? I thought, and stepped down into the living room and sat on the couch facing the mantel and the TV. In front of me, there was a carved mobile of a fish, like a Christian fish, hanging from a wire from the mantel. It was slowly rotating, and as it turned, the place where its eye would be sparkled. I got up and walked over to get a better look, and found that the entire thing was made of wood, nothing sparkly. Fairly creeped out, I went back to the sofa and turned on the TV. Logan's Run was playing, which is creepy enough. My friend headed out to the backyard to fill the pool and water plants. As soon as he closed the door and I was alone, all of the sound in the house stopped. No AC noise, no refrigerator noise, no TV noise. It was like a vacuum. Frantically, I started pressing the volume button on the remote. Slowly, I started to hear white noise like old TV static, but it sounded like it was happening directly in my ears, not coming from the TV. I started pressing the button on the remote, and it kept getting louder, until it transformed into a deafening, evil scream in my ears. I shot up off the sofa and ran outside. He looked up at me from the edge of the pool where he was kneeling. "You saw something?" he said. "I heard something," I replied. He looked down, averting his eyes. "Then we need to hurry," he said seriously. "Don't talk about it, or it gets worse." Before we left, I had to use the bathroom. "Good luck," he said. I was terrified. It was all old, tiny tile and exposed pipes. When you sat on the toilet, you faced the vanity mirror, which was crazy, so I stared at the floor. It was ridiculously colder in there than the rest of the house. The pipes were audibly creaking and groaning behind me, and above my head in a way that seemed excessive. I was staring at my shoes when I felt a hot breath on my neck and a low chuckle in one of my ears. I left without ever looking in the mirror. I was certain I would have seen something I wouldn't have liked. We left that house and got in the car. "Not yet," he said. We drove off and he said it again. "Not yet." When we got out of the neighborhood, he turned to me and said, "It crawls on me in my sleep." Turns out, that couple got the house for a really good deal, and now they wouldn't stay in it. They moved to Portland and never went back. The last thing I heard, 16 or 17 years ago, was they were having a very hard time selling it. And that concludes tonight's True Paranormal Encounters. I hope you are all resting or sleeping. And until then, I will read to you all soon.